If you think you know a thing or two about knives, I got bad news for you. We are destroying some more knife myths today in episode 257 of KniFAQ, the series where I answer all your questions, sharp or dull. Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the KnifeCenter. And in this series, we take your questions from the comment section. I try to answer them to the best of my abilities, and Thomas says snarky comments behind the camera.
Found a 10-year-old bucket of latex paint in my garage.
Cool story. Let's get into the questions right after this. All right, the first question today, which touches on a popular knife myth that I would like to address, and may have addressed before on the show too, but this truly falls under frequently asked question or frequently commented point. It comes from Jobo Baggins. Anything to say about that, Thomas?
I heard his family is a big fan of walking.
Yeah, they take hikes, don't they? Maybe we should talk about hiking knives for the Bagginses some other time. Anyway, here we go. Why don't you Americans know what a bloodlet is? The fuller on the propugnator, which is the video he was commenting on, is a bloodlet. When you push the blade deep into flesh, sometimes a vacuum will form where the blood is trying to flow. The bloodlet allows it to flow, and as a result, the blade doesn't get stuck in the wound. And he goes on. That may happen incidentally on occasion, but that is actually a pervasive knife myth that doesn't die. And part of it is, manufacturers, including my beloved K-Bar friends there, have picked up on it even, and actually use the term blood groove frequently in their marketing. But really, it's a marketing thing. Thank you, though, for Jobo, for teaching me a new term for that. I've never heard it called a bloodlet before, which is kind of interesting. Really, honestly, the true purpose of the fuller on the propugnator in particular, I think it's just decorative, quite honestly. It looks cool on this particular design, which is a cool-looking design. But when you apply it to something like the Mark II fighter or the USMC fighter, the 1217 K-Bar, it goes by many, many names. Sometimes just K-Bar. The primary purpose of this is not to give a place for blood to flow or to break suction. Because the thing is, if you've got squidgy material that would cause suction on a flat blade, these things are shallow enough it would probably cause suction there too, quite honestly. It's about balance and strength, essentially. By creating this, essentially, well, you can kind of think of it like an I-beam type of structure. You save material, making the knife lighter while maintaining strength on, or lateral strength. Lateral might not be the right engineering term. And it also, by removing the weight there, you affect the balance of the knife. So it does a lot of things. It's actually a pretty sophisticated thing. And it's actually named for the tool used to make it in traditional blacksmithing. That tool was the fuller. So you fullered a knife because you were taking the knife or the blade and using the fuller on it, and we've just grown to call the resulting depression a fuller. Interesting bit of history there. So, I don't fault anyone for repeating this particular knife myth, but it keeps getting repeated. So I'm going to keep talking about it on occasion.
It sounds cool on the internet, so they're going to keep saying it.
That's true. And like blood groove sounds way cooler than strength pocket. Oh, that's terrible.
Blood groove sounds like a Vampire Soul band.
Ooh, I like it. Now I'm imagining some sort of like old funk songs with the vampire accent. This would be pretty good.
They only play at night.
Yeah. Very true. So not coming after you, Jobo Baggins, but I did have to clean up your response there because you did seem pretty animated about it, and worth talking about every now and then. Anyway, next up, Limicola1 says, I hear this repeatedly from this channel about how tough MagnaCut steel is. It is pretty tough.
I say it frequently.
I do. However, when the edge chipped on NAFS's Scandi ground Lulu, the creator of MagnaCut said that a secondary bevel is needed to prevent chipping. If MagnaCut is so tough, Why is it chipping out on Scandi grinds when basic steels like 1095 and 12C27 can be ground to a true Scandi and used regularly for wood carving tools without chipping? Here's the myth. They're not. Ooh, fighting words. Here's the thing with tough steels like MagnaCut. You also mentioned 12C27, which is tougher than MagnaCut if treated optimally, of course. A Scandi grind is a very, very steep angle compared to like a standard knife edge with a secondary bevel. That might be, it can vary a little bit, but a good standard to go by is about 20 degrees per side. You can thin that out a little bit on tougher steels like MagnaCut or 12C27. It might be able to take a 17 or even 16 degree edge, provided you're not wrenching on it. A Scandi grind might be anywhere from 10 to 12 degrees per side. So it is very, very narrow. And pretty much, there are exceptions, pretty much every factory-made Scandi ground knife out there has some sort of micro bevel or secondary micro bevel right on the edge, including the NAF's Lulu right here. An excellent knife. I've been around long enough to remember, I guess it's not that long ago really, there have been a few like true Scandis on the market. CRKT had the Saker for a little while. Mora, who uses 12C27 and a 1095 by another name in their the bulk of their lineup, had this knife, the Pathfinder, or the Bushcraft Black Pathfinder. What did they wind up calling it actually? We have it called the Black Bushcraft Pathfinder on the page. Came with a longer blade and very notably at the time a true Scandi with no kind of secondary treatment. All the other Scandis in Mora's lineup have a little hint of a micro bevel right at the edge because it needs that extra toughness. So people, bushcraft folks were clamoring, we want a true Scandi. And I think while well-intentioned, it doesn't actually stand up in real-world applications. Sometimes what people think they want is not always like the right thing or the best thing. Again, I'm not trying to be like aggressive against the questioner here, but the problem came because they got what they wanted. They got the true Scandi grind on a longer knife, which means it's a bigger knife. I can be rougher with it, and people were getting these chipped out all over the place when they first got introduced. So they had to adjust the production of it essentially. Now I'm looking at this one here, quite honestly, it may still be a true ground Scandi. If there is a micro bevel, it is extremely micro. I'm having a hard time discerning it if there is. So you might be able to get what you want with this particular knife. But a Scandi grind is not, like a true Scandi grind is not as tough as a lot of people think it is. Even like an LT Wright knife. Well, backing up, here's the thing as well. You may get a knife with a true Scandi, but as soon as you go to sharpen it, even if you're being like the best you possibly can, laying that Scandi grind flat on the stone, following it perfectly, as you sharpen it, you're going to get a hint of convex right at the edge. Like, it's unavoidable. It's going to happen no matter how perfect you are. And ultimately that is going to make it tougher. That's going to make it stronger. Also, the potential for a very, very thin edge to overheat when they're sharpening it, that could come into play too. And by removing just a little bit that micro bevel or putting that little micro bevel on, might get past that slightly overcooked steel. That is certainly a possibility. But yeah, hand sharpening your Scandi, you're gonna get you're not gonna have a true Scandi for very long. It's kind of impossible. LT Wright, I want to bring them up. The way they finish their Scandi edges is on a hard buffing wheel. And they're not the only ones that do this, but I know, I'm kind of pretty familiar with their manufacturing pipeline essentially, and that is the last step. And even though it's a hard wheel, it has some give to it. So when they go in and buff, like so, they're not putting like a defined micro bevel on it, but the edge itself is getting ever so slightly convexed over, giving it the strength you want from a Scandi grind. So anyway, true Scandi grinds don't exist. I guess is the moral of the story, even when they do. Or if
Scandis are double planed chisels, you don't whittle with a chisel.
Actually, like Scandi, well, you do whittle with Scandi grinds.
Yes. But you don't whittle with chisels.
I mean, you cut wood, like,
I just
okay.
wanted to say whittle with chisels.
Whittle, which, like, let's define whittling here. No, let's not do that. That's too weedy for today. Alive 28697 says, this is a response to a cooking knife short we did. When you're cutting something, like the apple in this video, you should always cut with the blade facing away from your body, not towards your body as you're doing here. Come on, this is basic knife safety, what gives. I too was taught when I was a young Boy Scout to never cut toward your body. And
Same.
when you are an scout leader in an troop full of many young boys with raging hormones, et cetera, and like full of vim and vigor.
And sugar.
Often sugar. Oh man, that the soda machine was unsupervised. That was a problem for some of us.
Official drink was Tang.
Yeah. I used to go down like 3 cans of brisk iced tea every meeting. It was not good.
Amazing we're alive.
There's a reason those scoutmasters told us not to cut towards ourselves, because we were all hopped up on brisk iced teas and Tang, and things happen, and they don't want to have to deal with cuts. It's going to happen anyway. They're going to deal with cuts, but they're trying to minimize that a little bit. And in general, yes, cutting away from yourself is the safest method, but there are plenty of times with proper technique where edge facing towards the body is perfectly acceptable. One of them, that particular example, when you're paring, which is ostensibly what a paring knife is designed to do, you're holding it like this. In fact, some of the edge is very, very close to your flesh right there, and you're doing this. This is a very controlled motion. You're not, like ripping it towards yourself. In a way, the knife is moving almost less than, in this case, the apple is. The food is moving a little bit more. Yes, the edge is facing towards you. I've seen other, wood carving techniques. I've got a book on, a Swedish book on wood carving, like bushcraft stuff. There are holds, and I'm not an expert at them, that are, you've got people holding knives in like weird ways, doing all kinds of I don't know. I don't even know when it's applicable, quite honestly. But there are times where, edge facing towards you in a controlled manner is perfectly safe. Caveat, know what you're doing before you engage in any of this. We got to get Joe Flowers down here to, teach us some of those interesting knife holds that are a little bit unconventional. So, yeah.
Just hand him a new loo and let the camera roll.
So yeah, cutting towards yourself can be just fine. It's not a full taboo as many of us, including myself, were brought up to believe initially. Anyway, now we come to our measured once, cut twice segment, where in this case, instead of taking a second slice at a previously answered question, I'm going to summarize you guys' response to last week's video, where I asked you, based off of one of our questions there, what are some of the things, knife opinions you've held that have changed over time? This is a good opportunity to bring this back up, since we're talking about myths that aren't quite true, changing your opinion. And there were a few interesting ones, but to me the most interesting thing was the sheer number of people who brought up an almost identical point. And that point was, I used to not like Spydercos because I thought they were so stinking ugly until I used Spydercos, and now I like Spydercos. There were a ton of comments that were echoing that same sentiment.
All those people judging a bug by its cover.
Judging a bug by its cover. Nice. So I thought that was worth mentioning. And in order to have a knife to hold during this question, I decided to pick the ugliest Spyderco currently on sale at the KnifeCenter, and that is the Assist Rescue right here, 135 VG10 steel. It's actually really comfortable. And here's the thing, like Spyderco knives, the joke is they're designed in the dark because they're designed on how they feel in the hand and how they work, not how they look. And for purpose-driven tools like this, works. It's designed to work, I should say. Whistle in the handle even, which is pretty cool. Anyway, cool to see that kind of coming together. All right, now we come to the lightning round for today. Josh the Furnace Guy says, somewhere I came across a style of slipjoint that had a notch at the tip. A picture up here of a case razor. That at the tip end that was exposed when the knife was closed. I was told this allowed amputees to open the knife one-handed by hooking it on their pocket. Is there any truth to this story? This may or may not be a knife myth. I'm going to use you guys, the comments section, to kind of weigh in on this subject. Is that something you have heard before? I will say whether that was designed specifically for amputees to do that or not, it would certainly work in that sort of situation. So it's sort of like a tail wagging the dog thing, or it could be anyway. I don't know which came first, the myth or the truth, or the whatever. Anyway.
I feel like the guys at Case told us something about this.
And there's a danger there, though. K-Bar talks about blood grooves. The things manufacturers say for marketing purposes may have a grain of truth to them or not.
I don't know what to believe anymore.
I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, and I'm not saying if Case told us that they're wrong, but, a good story sells a knife. So, Anyway, Eric Allaire says, Buck 119. The most overrated garbage knife of the lot. First of all, lower your voice, sir. No, there's a reason I'm mentioning this. I'm not throwing the 119 under the bus. I watched my friend making a fuzz stick out of pine when I was in the Boy Scouts. I still remember his face when he saw the edge of the blade missing 3 or 4 chips. The edge was so hard it chipped like glass. He ended up testing the rest of the knife as a pry bar to split a log, and the handle cracked just after the guard. Never liked that ridiculous look, nor the sheath. The Buck 119 sheath is actually one of my favorite factory leather sheaths ever made. It's pretty ingenious the way the flap gets out of the way and wraps around the back so it doesn't snag. I kind of stole that detail and put it on the canteen knife sheath after all. But anyway, pine wood is the central pillar of this lightning round myth I want to talk about. Pine wood is soft, yes. Pine knots are way stinking hard. So whether or not he hit some pine knots or not, or whether he had a badly heat-treated example back in the Boy Scouts, who knows? But it is way and very possible for a knife to chip out in pine if you hit a knot at the wrong angle. You talk about the steel being hard as glass. Pine knots are hard as glass. Let me tell you that. And then if you're driving this into a log and using it as a pry bar to this is a stick tang knife. Of course it's not made to do something like that. Maybe the myth is the knife is not as strong as you necessarily think it should be. Treat the tools a little better, perhaps. If you want a knife that you could use as a pry bar like that, at least go with something like the Companion, the BK2, or the 92 or 82, which come in magnet cut, or like the SE5, like a 1/4 inch thick carbon tough steel whatever blade. At least give the knife a fighting chance in this sort of situation, man. But yeah, pine knots are hard. They can ruin a knife or an axe in a hurry, man. Anyway.
Sounds like he's being naughty with the knife.
Could have been. WB5MGR. It's not a fighting knife, and I won't argue that it's better or worse, but the Buck 119, this was on the Beat the Icon video we did on the K-Bar. The 119 is every bit as iconic of a blade as the K-Bar, just in a different role. Marketing, again, confuses the world. The 119 Special is marketed as a hunting knife. The K-Bar, of course, is marketed as a fighting knife. You know when both of these were introduced? Both of these were introduced in World War II as fighting knives. There you go.
One of them just retired.
True fact. Like the 119 Special was introduced during World War II as, in response to the requisition for this type of knife from the U.S. Armed Forces. And the more you know. It's a cool bit of history right there. Now we come to our finalist question. Stop moving, Buck. Which is, of course, our most seriousest question of the day, which comes from Matt Campbell, who flipped things around on me a little bit. Most serious question. What kind of a knife would a woodchuck use if a woodchuck could not chuck wood? I had to think about this one, and I think I have a good answer for you. Another name for the woodchuck, of course, is the Whistlepig. Do I even need to say the punchline? That's all we got time for today, folks. Keep your questions coming. Keep your most seriousest questions coming. If you have any like knife myths you think are out there that deserve to be like looked at, taken seriously or not, drop those in the comments as well. If you want to get your hands on any of these items in front of me right here, check out the links in the description. Those will take you to KnifeCenter.com. And don't forget our long-running Knife Rewards program or our Sezzle payment option at checkout if you want to break things up into smaller payments. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera. We are signing off for now. See you next time.